the great man himself, Robbie Ball. How are you, brother? Thanks for coming on the show.
Good, mate. It's an absolute pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure to be on your, esteemed podcast.
Mate, the pleasure is all mine. As always, anytime I get to have a conversation with you, just the beauty of this one is that everyone else gets to enjoy it as well. So, mate, firstly, thanks for having me on your show recently. It was a really good conversation. Again, you're someone that I love to turn to for advice and take a bit of inspiration from. So I do appreciate it. But I think today you're going to be able to offer the audience just so much value. And a couple of the main things I really want to touch on in this episode is, I guess, the mindset and also the strategy for those business owners or entrepreneurs out there. Whether they're brand new, which is something that's kind of come up over the last 18 months while everyone's been stuck at home, or whether it's someone who's been running a business or trying to grow a business for years now. I think everyone's going to be able to take something away. So we'll jump straight in. The first thing I wanted to ask you is, as I've just said, with people being at home over the last 18 months, a lot of people have, including myself, have started up side hustles or even their main business, and particularly through e-commerce. I think everyone started to realize that e-commerce, if they didn't realize it already, is huge. So a lot of people are trying to dabbling in that area. So I found myself when Danielle and I first started Unify, that something that really stuck out to me is how overwhelming it can be right from day one when you have the idea and you kind of think to yourself, fuck yeah, how good's this? I've got something that I can start to grow and it's really exciting. But then when you go to take that first step, it's like, fuck, where do I start? Like, you've obviously grown some incredibly successful businesses and been through the trenches yourself. So when you're starting out a new project, and maybe it's even something similar to the podcast, like what's your strategy to really break things down and reverse engineer how you're going to get to the finish line or to the point where you've got a product to the market? What is a strategy you use to not let overwhelm kind of get the better of you?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, it's easy to start a brand or start a business. The hard part is keeping it going and scaling it, and trying to find your way through the jungle that is business. So I suppose unfortunately, there's no blueprint, as you know, in business to be able to get where you want to go. And most of the time there's the discrepancy between where you start and where you want to be is just, it's a mishmash of, I don't know. And, for me, as you said, I've been through that a couple of times now. And it's still, you get a clearer picture of how that might eventuate, how you might take that brand from idea or that business from idea to reality to scale to sort of maturity. But still, there's so many variables. There's, product market fit is obviously a big thing, where before you go and invest thousands of dollars into an idea, you need to be able to prove that it works, right? So, with Shopify and all this technology now, it's really easy to get set up. Like, if you wanted to start an e-commerce business, you could literally get it set up in a day. The difference, and I suppose where people kind of don't make that next leap, is really understanding the systems behind scaling a business. It's like, as easy it is to actually get set up visually to customers, behind the scenes, the systems, the processes, the strategy behind the scenes is a totally different game. That's that's a minefield. That's where the difference is.
I think we've got two ends of the scale when it comes to people that are starting out. One end, you've got the people who almost get the old, what is the saying, paralysis by analysis, like over analyzing every detail, trying to make sure it's perfect. Got a guest here, little Russ man wants to jump in. Hop down, Chief. Over analyzing everything and almost trying to make sure everything's perfect before they even start, which is just never going to be the case. And those type of people, I find, you look at and always talking the talk, never really walking the walk. There's nothing that actually ever happens. So it's all good in theory, but when you put it to work, nothing's actually happening. And then on the other end of the scale, you've got people who are really just putting next to no thought to it, and it's almost like just one shiny object after the other. It's like, what's popular now? I'm going to start this business with no real passion behind it or no structure or strategy, as you mentioned, which end do you tend to lean towards with any of the businesses that you've worked in or started? Do you try and make sure that everything's as perfect as possible before you take it to market, whether it even just be something as simple as like an EDM, or are you more along the lines of just get it in front of people, just put it out there, see what sticks, what doesn't, and then just keep adapting as you go?
Look, I think the key is just putting things out there and seeing what sticks. But, we had an internal saying, and it was basically just launch. So whether we think the product is absolutely perfect, the more you sit on it, the more things that you think you can improve, you're going to find those things. The more you sort of stew on it, the more you kind of, as you said, analyze things, and you end up doing nothing. As opposed to if you put that product out there, see what people think, see what the feedback is, and then you can iterate that product to the next level. So example with Uncle Jack, which is one of my first businesses, was the products that our very, very first product, like right at the start, we had no idea what we were doing. It was different to what we had actually ordered. So we were like, shit, what do we do here?
Yeah.
And we ended up just launching it because like we basically had no other option. Look, we had no more money in the bank. This was it. And
I guess at the same time as well, the audience, I don't know if you'd put out some feelers, but the audience probably had no idea that it was different than what you'd expected either. So for them, it's still their first time seeing a product.
Yeah, exactly. And we put it out there and the rest was history. Like it sold out in, like so quick. And then we never actually changed the product from that model. So it's pretty crazy how that works in terms of like, you can do so much planning, but you keep iterating the product and then you put it out finally and it never sells. But if you put out the raw product and, what I really love is kind of telling the story or showing a human side of the business, and basically tell people like, this is our first product. Like it may not be perfect, but this is where we are. We appreciate your support and we love to get your feedback. I mean, that's really the human side and the story side of business that I think in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be huge.
Yeah, and there's a few things I wanted to touch on, but we can come back to it because we'll stick on this topic because I wanted to take it there anyway. In terms of the storytelling, that's a huge one, and that's definitely something that I've personally taken from guys like yourself and Joe with Athletikan and Uncle Jack and a bunch of other people as well, of how important that is and in telling the story and almost letting people in. And we talked about on your podcast the importance of community and having people be able to feel like they're part of something. Is that something that you guys did from day one, particularly with, say, an Uncle Jack and especially with Athletikan once you already had the experience there? Is it about not so much just about the product, but about trying to get those that buy the product to feel like they're part of something and have them part of the story as well?
100%. And if you can get that product market fit or find your perfect audience from as close as you can to the beginning of where you start, you can start building that momentum of community earlier. And the sooner, it's like a compounding effect. It's like momentum. The sooner you start, the more it's going to kind of snowball. So that's where if you don't have that product market fit from the start, one, you could be attracting the wrong audience, or two, you're just not going to sell anything.
Yeah.
So you're right. Community is just like, it's just so important being able to attract your crowd. And with Athletikan, we're attracting, a similar crowd to you,
Yeah.
We're looking at the people in the fitness industry, people who are working out, they want to look good. So we've really kind of not capitalized, it's not the right word, but I suppose cultivated that community feel. So we do a few things. I think, you do it really well in terms of bringing together your community, but just things like creating Facebook groups where people can interact. I mean, that's the thing about communities is two-way communication. It's not us just yelling at them with, new products or new offers or promos. We get, which is really cool. We get people posting like, oh, I missed out on, whatever color. Does anyone have it in a size 8?
Yeah, I love that. That's so
cool.
cool.
Or have a look at my collection, and people are commenting, oh, love that style. How do you keep them clean or whatever?
Yeah.
So you really create that fan base.
What would you say to someone that almost feels like they don't have a story for their company or their brand? Because I think, when people hear that it's so important to have the story, or it's so important to have this community vibe or something, a message that you can push for those people that have purely just brought out a business or a company because the demand was there and they saw it as an opportunity and they don't really have a story. It's almost like forced. Like people start to just take other people's stories and come up with something that sounds good or looks good on paper. They can push it out there. Have you got any advice for people that just are stuck with what their actual story is as to whether or not they should come up with one that's just bullshit, or whether, or just keep kind of, or let it come to them, or like, what's your advice for that type of individual?
No, I actually have a good answer to this, which is good. Surprising. This is few and far between. So the issue here is your story is not about you. So that's purely an egotistical look at me sort of thing. When you say, oh, this is who I am and this is my product and this is what I do, your story is about your customer. Mm-hmm. So, let's just say with Athletikan, our story is all about, our customer, Danny Kennedy, who works out. He just wants a good pair of shoes to go to the gym in. That's the story that we're championing. That's all our advertising, all our marketing is based around you, the customer. And what we're trying to do is tell a story through our content, through our product. So when you're talking about a story, it's who cares that you're founded in 2014 and in Melbourne? No one gives a shit. Like, that's not a story. Yeah. Like, the story is about how you're bringing in a community or a customer, and this is how you're creating a product based on two-way feedback and cultivating this community. I mean, that's the story. So it doesn't need to be forced. It's because if you've got a target market, you've got a story.
And then I guess almost using your content, as you said. So I'm assuming, and like, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it about, as you just said, like if I see, say, a video on Athletikan, the idea is for me to be able to see that and see myself in the video almost, or like see myself as being very similar to what I'm seeing in that video, or seeing like kind of grabbing my attention because it's something that I can relate to. Is that kind of what you mean? Yeah,
exactly. And you want to feel like you belong to that tribe. Like, it's all about tribes, right?
Tribe. Yeah.
So, it's a sense of belonging. Like, I think, is a quote of yours, but it's about really understanding who your target market is and doing things around them, championing them. You're just like, you're the, I don't know, you're just like the provider of these things. But it's not about you. It's about them.
Yeah, I love that. In terms of a question that I wanted to ask you, this gets thrown around a bit on a few interviews, particularly with like the bigger entrepreneurs, and let's say someone like a Gary Vee or something. He gets asked this quite a lot. Do you think that someone is either born with entrepreneur traits, or it's something that can be taught?
It's not something that I necessarily have listened to or read a lot on, so I don't know what the commentary is around that. But
what's
in
your
my
opinion?
Experience, yeah, I mean, I suppose I've got an unbiased opinion because I haven't really had that discussion.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I think for me anyway, I always had that skill set of being able to look at opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was starting businesses when I was in like year 8. Like, I reckon I had like 3 different high school businesses, like importing shoes. I started a compression wear brand.
Yeah, right.
And just like things like that that I think is hard to teach in terms of going, oh, well, there's an opportunity here.
Yeah. I posted on my story this morning, actually, I went to grab a coffee from the cafe near my place, and there was this poster in the window. This kid, I think he might have been 15, so he's not too young, but he created this little poster of like a lawnmower, a car and some other shit. And he'd like filled it. He'd written on the poster like, you know, I'm 15 years old, live in so and so, looking to do the odd jobs or some shit, and like literally any job that you want. And he just stuck it up in his cafe. And I was like, that's brilliant. Like I put on my story, like good on him. Yeah. Got his phone number there. Like hit me up. I'll come and do whatever you want.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's just like drive, you know, you can't teach that.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean, and I'm going to be an absolute weirdo here and answer my own question. I think that in terms of that side of things, like you touched on before, like year 8, you're starting businesses and shit like that. I don't think that can be taught. And that's obviously, you can't fucking rewind time and tell yourself to start a business in year 8. That is just instinct, I think. But in terms of running a successful business, not so much the entrepreneur traits, but running a successful business, I think it's definitely something that can be taught. Particularly if you're learning from the right people. And on that topic of like learning and education, what's your kind of stance, I guess, on, we talked about it quickly on the podcast, on your show, which I'll have the link to in the show notes. But what's your stance on courses online for entrepreneurship or for starting a business, particularly the ones that you see that aren't even specific to an actual business or industry itself? It's literally just like how to start a business, how to be a successful entrepreneur, how to become a salesman or whatever. And on the second part of that, I think a lot of the time they're really people that haven't established themselves as a entrepreneur anyway. Like they sell courses about being an entrepreneur, but have never done it themselves. Whereas someone like yourself who has been through it and has all the experience, has seen the highs and the lows, could probably start a course and it's a bit more reputable. But what are your thoughts on that side of things?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll try and link it back to sort of the last point as well, where, you know, we talked about that instinctiveness. I think the other bridge between those two questions is your ability to bring together resources and take a risk. And the majority of people don't want to take that risk. They're happy being, in kind of a safe environment in their comfort zone.
Feeling comfortable.
Whether that be financially or socially or whatever, that's kind of the gap between those two. So in terms of education, going out and getting an MBA, yes, you are more qualified to run a business, but the chances are you're going to be running the business for a person who's taken that risk. You're essentially going to, most cases, you're going to be an employee of someone who's taken that risk and seen the opportunity, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But in terms of being an entrepreneur, you certainly don't need a qualification in an MBA, or look, you don't need any formal education to be an entrepreneur. My stance on that is, I have a bachelor's degree, so I wouldn't say that makes me biased, because a lot of people that go through the university system come out the other side.
How much do you think the degrees helped? Honestly,
it hasn't helped me from a career standpoint.
Okay.
It's helped me from a social point of view. It's helped me from a skills building point of view. It's helped me from a general diversity and awareness point of view. You're dealing with people from, other areas, other countries, other cultures, that you may not have dealt with otherwise. Things like I hated group work, man. Like that's one of the worst things you could do. But in hindsight, it's one of those real, character developing type of scenarios where you are literally forced to work with the person that you've been put with, or like you're not getting anywhere. So I think to answer your question, I think there's a place for it. I think if I had kids and they said, look, I don't want to go to uni, I'd be like, cool, what are you doing?
Okay.
Like, what are you learning? But in saying that, to answer your other question, in terms of like short courses, like I think they're key. Like I'm doing one right now to upskill in something. But yeah, you obviously got to be careful about where you're getting your courses from. Like you want to make sure it's reputable, or you trust the person that's giving you that information or selling you the information.
Yeah, not to reiterate too much about what we'd already spoke about on your show, but we briefly touched on how important it is to actually implement what you learn in these courses. I touched on how I found myself in a point where I was like reading all these books or listening to a bunch of podcasts and just listening to it, just almost having like an awakening moment of how good is this shit? Like the content's unreal, but then finishing it and going, all right, what am I going to watch next, or what am I going to read next? And then I haven't actually implemented any of their stuff. So you could become amazing at consuming content, and all this shit, but you haven't actually put any of it to practice. And that's what I find typically. I obviously don't have as much experience in terms of running particularly obviously not running an e-commerce business, but in terms of even the health and fitness industry, it's like all these people have gone to uni or do have all this knowledge or go to every fucking seminar that comes up, but they're never implementing it. Like you don't see them actually doing any of the shit that they learn. And practical is very, very, very different. And that's probably one thing I found, and I don't know what your thoughts are, but with the true entrepreneur is ever since it's become kind of cool, like people have started it's become almost like a bit of a trend to have your own business or to be an entrepreneur. When push comes to shove, like you said, like the real entrepreneurs are taking massive risks, like financial risks, social risks, like career risks, without any real fear of what the result is. They're kind of going all in, where a lot of people, once they get to that point, are not actually ready for that, or they're not built for that. They just can't. They're just not that guy. And you hear all the time about how it's okay to be number 2 or number 3 or number 4 in a company where you are using your actual skills and putting in the work to make what you're worth without having to have that risk as well. So I think that's probably something for people to consider around entrepreneurship. Not everyone has to be the main guy or the main girl.
Yeah, and I think particularly COVID and lockdowns has not forced, but it's sort of made people stop and realize, I could do a side hustle, which is fine. But I think, I know I can kind of sniff from a mile away what's a hobby and what's a legitimate business as far as like a commercial perspective. But whether that relates to whether you should do it or not is totally separate. Obviously, you don't want to be putting money into something that's essentially becomes a liability for you, where you're constantly topping it up with more money just so you can say you have a business, or you have a side hustle, or you have a brand. That's just an ego thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you want to have a proper crack, you obviously need to invest time and money into it.
What's your process around, I guess, a failure or a loss in the business? So let's say you've planned this launch, you have expectations for it to do super well. Maybe it doesn't reach the standards that you expected or put on the launch. What's the process then? Like going back to the drawing board, like do you have a set kind of like review system that you do for each launch to see where it could have gone wrong or what needs to change next time? Is it like a real analytical type thing, or do you just kind of go by feel?
Yeah. So I think I've probably failed as many times as I've won. So I would say I've probably won slightly more than I've lost in terms of products or campaigns or whatever. So the first point is you've got to take away the emotion from it. So you can't, like, one thing I always say, after a launch is let's just sit on it till tomorrow. We'll reevaluate. We'll look at the numbers. We'll look at the reaction. We'll look at the feedback, and then we'll make a decision on what's next. So methodically, what I make sure we do is we have a system that basically ranks or measures our performance. So we have a set criteria. We'll go, all right, well, this was X number, this was X number, this was X number. And we'll go, oh, actually, it was our, second best release or second best product concept of the year. It may not have gone as well as we would have liked, but it still went really well. And on the other side, we go, all right, well, that just didn't work. And then we go, okay, these are the numbers. Why didn't it work? Or what can we improve? How can we get feedback? How can we iterate this?
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, I think it's super important even, yeah, that's even shit like the journal that I've got sitting in front of me, like the nighttime review, like that's something that I've implemented over the last 12 months. And I've found that so beneficial, not even inside the business, just with life in general, about at least being aware of what's happening. Because that's, I think, the big problem with not so much just business, like I said, but in general, like when shit doesn't go your way, it's easy to just sit there and fucking feel sorry for yourself and be upset about it. But why did it not go well? Like there's always most of the time always going to be a reason or things that you can control to make sure it's different next time. In terms of something that I struggled with early on, and to an extent I still do today, is feeling like I need to do everything inside the business. Feeling like, the harder I work, the more I deserve to be successful, or almost like wearing like a badge of honor, like fucking look how hard I work type of thing.
Yeah.
And not being able to palm off certain things or delegate certain tasks to other people, particularly things that are my weakness. How important have you found that as an entrepreneur to be able to hire other people or palm off things that you're not good at and really just focus on your strengths?
Yeah, I've always put a really high value on my time, and that's not an arrogant thing. That's just a self-aware thing. Understanding what your time is worth, and then if it's not, if a certain task is not of that value, then you can delegate it. So that's when you start getting an understanding of what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. I remember early on, we had a meeting in the city, and someone said, "Oh, we're near the train station. Why don't we just catch the train in, and we only have to walk like a kilometer?" And I was like, that's going to take us like an hour and 15. Let's just pay for an Uber or whatever. And it was like totally expensive. Like we're in a city area, but it's just like it's going to shave half the time. Don't care if it costs a little bit more, because I'm going to make that back by being able to do what I do. So that's just a little example. I mean, look, I don't think you should completely go over the top with things like that, but it's just a small example of understanding how valuable your time is. And then working backwards and going, all right, well, I'm spending too much time on, this task. This is where I need to get some help. But yeah, I work like a dog, like you, maybe not as hard as you, but I don't see that as a badge of honor. Like I'm trying to go back. Like I'm trying to work backwards rather than like trying to take on more. So it's not necessarily for me being a thing where I'm like, I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. Like I'm trying to work smarter.
I think, I understand what you're saying. I've, when I say like the badge of honor, I've made myself sound like an absolute fuckwit there. But I also mean, I think it comes definitely from as well, like, particularly, like I know you had sporting background, but as when I was playing sport, it was all about, like, for me, my whole mindset was around the one thing I can control is just making sure I work harder than everyone else. And that was always like what I did. And that's what I carried into business as well. And to be fair, it's only like been recently over the past 12 to 18 months where I'm now trying to go more down the pathway of how you approach it. Like, work backwards, like do less, but make sure the work that I am doing is producing bigger results, if that makes sense, instead of just like being busy for the sake of being busy. In terms of like on the second part of that question, is how much time or emphasis do you place on growing your weaknesses, or do you really just stick to your strengths?
I like to have a little bit of understanding of everything. And then delegate out to people that are more talented, more intelligent than I am. For example, like I'm quite good at understanding numbers, but in terms of putting multiple things together, that's not my strong point. I will delegate that to someone to do that for me.
Putting what together? Like multiple things, as in, like, give us an example.
Like, as in, like, like correlations between, say, a profit and loss sheet and a cash flow statement. Like I'm like, once I've got the numbers, I'll be able to understand them and go, this is that. But in terms of doing more complex sums and stuff, like I'm much more comfortable handing that off to someone. But it's the same with like legal things. Like, you know, if we're coming up with a new name for a product, I'll be like, okay, well, I'll just do a quick search and I'll see if it's clear. And then if I'm not sure, I'm not just going to take a risk. I'm going to put that into, you know, I'm going to send it over to our legal team, our lawyers, and go, you tell me, because I'm not going to just guess this.
Yeah.
It's too big of a decision. So it's just knowing, for me, to answer your question, it's knowing a little bit about everything and then knowing when you've reached your limit.
In terms of running a business, and particularly when you've got staff like you do, and particularly like you had with Uncle Jack as well, and the output of the work you're doing is so important, and it's so much. Like, how much of an importance do you place on your physical and mental health, and how much of a correlation do you find that has with your productivity in the workplace and when you are trying to be creative or just productive at work?
Yeah, it's interesting for me. I think the key thing there is having a good routine, and that obviously encompasses a strong health and fitness sort of aspect. So, you know, as you said, I've sort of come from a sports background as well, so I'm pretty into my sort of fitness, and luckily for me, that kind of comes naturally. I know it doesn't come naturally for a lot of people, and they kind of force themselves to get into those habits. But certainly once you get into that rhythm, and I find that it makes your day a lot easier, because I think, you know, you would know this a lot more than I do about, you know, the impacts, but I certainly feel less stressed after I've worked out. I certainly feel less edgy. I feel more grounded. So all in all, though, I think it's about balance. Like, you know, if you're working out too much, that can affect your work. And if you're working too hard and not doing enough exercising again, but you're never going to have that balance, right? Though, like, perfectly, you know, beautiful line, are you? Like, you're just trying to get it as close as you can.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I just don't think there is a balance. You know, this is like the conclusion I'm starting to really come to the more and more I think about it, and also like the more and more people I talk to about the topic, is there really is no balance, like ideal balance anyway. And if you're at the point where you are perfectly balancing all of it, I can almost guarantee you're not excelling in any of it. You know what I mean? Like, as much as most people probably don't want to hear that, particularly the girlfriends or the boyfriends out there that are listening to it. It just doesn't work like that. But I think for people like you and I who do have the background of exercising or playing sport or whatever, you really don't understand how much of an impact their physical and mental health has on your productivity with work until you stop. Like, anytime I've had like a bit of an injury or been crook or whatever, and you do miss, say, a few days or a week or a few weeks of training, that's when you really start to notice how much it was impacting you before. Because when you're on like kind of almost autopilot each day, it becomes part of your routine. You tend to lose perspective of how much of an impact it has on your day to day.
Yeah. And I think there's also like a guilt aspect to it as well. Like, you know,
sure.
I haven't done this. And it kind of weighs on you though. Like, it's a like a mental thing, an emotional thing.
Yeah. What have you done throughout lockdown to maintain your consistency and productivity with work and make sure shit gets done, but also just in terms of communicating with staff and those that you work with to make sure that the wheels keep rolling?
Yeah, mate, I'm doing the stupidest thing that you could ever do, and I don't recommend it to anyone, but I'm doing a 66-day challenge where I'm working out twice a day, and I'm on day, at the time of recording, I think I'm on day 58 today.
How many days are you doing it for?
Look, 66.
Okay, so
66 days to form a habit.
Nearly there.
I'm nearly there, but yeah. So anyway, I'm working out a lot during lockdown, too much actually. I'm certainly not going to continue to work out today once I'm finished with this challenge. But the purpose of it for me, and this is not like a public challenge that people do, this is just my own personal challenge. The key for me was I wanted to get into a better routine from a workout perspective, where because I'm not playing as much sport anymore, you know, when you're playing organized sport. It's all done for you. Like you just rock up.
You don't put any thought to it.
Yeah, these are your training times. You're expected at this weight session at that time. And then when you're on your own, it's very different where you've actually got to think about it. So for me, it's just about really getting into that routine, which I'm doing through this, but through that challenge as well, I'm doing a lot of things that you already do in terms of journaling, reflection, which I'm finding really helpful. I'm doing prioritizing high impact work first. So I think that's been a big game changer for me. Look, I've always been a very productive worker. I think this is just kind of taking me to that next level where I'm developing some habits that I'm going to be able to use, for the rest of my life. So, to answer your question, those are the things that have kind of kept me going and through lockdown. In terms of communication, like we're in this age where it's more than, like, we're not in the office, obviously, so it's more than acceptable to be on the phone, on Zoom calls, and on chat or whatever, just to get things done. I think the good thing is most people are pretty understanding as well of space, like,
yeah,
because otherwise when you're at home, you're almost always on, aren't you? Because you're always available.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the one thing that I've found throughout lockdown, particularly, like, to be honest, last year, even though we're in lockdown most of the year, obviously gyms were shut, so I was training clients outdoors like all day, every day. Like not all day, but every day in fucking freezing cold, but like outdoors. Just whereas this year, I haven't done as much of that. We've been out of lockdown a bit more this year, obviously. So now that I've kind of just got my gym set up, I've set up a little gym at home and not really doing as much client work in person, because I think a lot of people are almost a bit over it. Like I've now started to realize like how quickly you can all just fucking mold into one. Like if you don't really separate it and structure your day. So like I get out my journal in the morning, and I'm sure you do something similar, but I try and block out like almost hour by hour for the day, like what task is going to be done, and stick to that. And, like pick your space to meditate, pick your space to work, pick your space to train, to eat, to sleep, whatever. So then you can still kind of compartmentalize like certain areas of the house or your apartment or wherever the fuck you're staying. So that it does feel productive, because it's very easy just to, it's hard to motivate yourself to train if it's in the exact same spot you sit down to watch TV and eat dinner and meditate and do the rest of it.
Yeah. And what about, do you think, like in terms of coming out of your comfort zone and not getting too caught up in routine in lockdown, which is hard, what are you doing to kind of combat that?
It is quite difficult for me. Like it's just little things, to be honest. Like obviously you don't really have the opportunity to go and do anything outrageous. So it's just small things that I do daily. So it's having a cold shower every morning, like as soon as I get out of bed, which just starts the day uncomfortable, which for me just kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day. And also just builds that mental resilience and strength to know that, like, the very last thing that you want to do in the middle of winter is get out of bed and jump straight in a freezing cold shower. But all of a sudden, the 3 emails you got to reply to, or the bill you've got to pay, or the 30-minute workout, or whatever you got to do throughout the day, the discipline to just do it without having put too much thought to it or procrastinating, I think builds over time. Other than that, man, it's just like still trying to challenge myself physically with training. And then for me, it's been, particularly last year, got super uncomfortable starting an e-commerce business, which was and still is like such a learning process. But even things like just learning, like just every day trying to do a bit of reading, listen to an audio book, have conversation, like doing more and more podcasts with people, like just having conversations, and I'm just trying not to get caught up in the fact that a lot of people's mindsets, I think, have almost gone to like, we'll just sit this out or just wait it out until things go back to normal, then we'll resume what we were doing before. For me, I'm like, I know that a lot of people are feeling like that. So this is an opportunity to level up and grow and just adapt and then find new things to add into the business, or new ways to improve my morning routine, or whatever the fuck it is. I've found it almost like a bit of a challenge to do the opposite of what most other people are doing. I don't know what about you?
Yeah, I mean, Mate, I think
Obviously, you're
you're the
doing
king.
training twice a day, so that's pretty fucking uncomfortable. But outside of
Yeah,
that,
physically very
yeah,
uncomfortable, but no, mate. I think like you're the king of I think segmenting and compartmentalizing certain parts of the day. I've got no doubt about that. I think the big challenge for myself and a lot of people in lockdown is it feels like we're kind of, mentally and emotionally just kind of treading water. Just, we're going to the same spot every day to work. And it kind of like from an industry level, it feels like things are kind of staying still.
okay,
And that's hard to
mm,
get yourself out of that rut when conceptually or from a perceptive or um, point of view, things are kind of quite stagnant because they are. Things aren't happening. Developments aren't really happening.
mm.
So it is difficult to get yourself out of that mindset. So, that is where you need to kind of step out of your comfort zone and go,
Yeah.
well, what can I do?
I found it really important. The old saying of the product of the five people you surround yourself with. Like when you can't really be surrounding yourself with a bunch of other people, but at the same time, probably the majority of people that you do bump into are the exact opposite headspace of what you want to be in. It's even more dangerous. So you think about walking out of a local cafe and you bump into whoever you bump into, there might be 5-10 people waiting for a coffee, and probably a majority of them are talking about how shit their lockdown is and how much it sucks in order to work or whatever. So you can see how easy it is to get trapped in the vicious cycle of negativity and even content. Like fucking every man and his dog is posting about lockdown and whatnot because let's be honest, there's not much else that's going on. But I've found it so important now more than ever to be really cautious of what content I'm consuming and from who it's by and what people I am having conversations with outside of being at home with Danielle and Russ. Like, who do I really want to surround myself with at all times to make sure that any exposure I am getting to other people, it's like with people that are thinking in the same way as what I am. So otherwise, if you are surrounding yourself with negativity, then you can't be surprised that you're going to be in the same spot.
Definitely. And it's a good chance to upskill as well. Going back to the topic of education and some of those courses, lockdown's a beautiful opportunity. I did a post yesterday. A lot of the expos, a lot of the, specific expos are now online and they're now free.
Yeah.
So like I've been really wanting to go to this specific expo that's in the US year after year, and I just for whatever reason haven't been able to get there. And now obviously because of COVID, it's now online, it's now free, and you can watch all the content that would be at this expo.
Unreal.
In your living room. So I would highly recommend people go and check out some of these trade shows and expos and things like that, because they're all going online and most of the time they're free. So it's a great opportunity to kind of expand your learning and kind of, learn something new in lockdown, upskill and get a new perspective.
100%, man. Well, mate, before we wrap it up, what's the future hold for you? Like, what any big plans? Have you got any kind of ambitions to start something new, keep pushing in the same direction, or what's it look like for you? I know, obviously, since you've finished up, you've sold Uncle Jack and whatnot, still working within Athletikan. Got the podcast now as well, which is doing awesome, and you've had some incredible guests on. Like, is now a bit of a period for you to just kind of feel it out and see what's next, or have you got some plans, or what's it look like?
Yeah, so look, I mean, Athletikan's growing really quickly, so I'm really enjoying being a little bit more hands-on in that, because I think business partner Joe, who's been on your pod, has really taken the reins for the last couple of years. So it's been good to kind of jump back into that. As you said, started the podcast, which is going really well. I'm enjoying it. I think the most important thing is I'm learning from it. I'm getting really interesting people like yourself on the pod who are offering really good insights to listeners, but also I'm kind of, there with the notepad, just writing things down.
Yeah.
But yeah, on top of that, I've kind of had a little bit of time now to reflect on that journey. It would have been great to just kind of, F off and travel somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, I've certainly got some soft plans, I would say, in the works for some new stuff.
Cool.
Which I'm pretty excited about. Like I'm like really hungry. Like I'm starving just to do things. So I'm never going to be bored. I can assure you that.
Yeah. I have absolutely no doubt about that. Mate, where can people find your content? I'll obviously have the links to it in the show notes, but where's the best place for people to kind of find out more about yourself and consume your content?
Yeah, so robbieball.com's my personal website. You can find my social media links there. The Off Court podcast, which I think you'll have a link to anyway, and Athletikan.com's the athleisure sneaker brand, so you can check that out. That's probably the best place to find me.
Awesome, mate. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation as always. Hopefully the listeners taken a lot of value out of the episode as well. So for those that are tuned in, whether you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, or watching on YouTube, make sure you take a screenshot of this episode for us. Post it up on Instagram story, tag myself, tag Robbie. We'd love to hear your feedback and make sure you go and give the great man a follow and keep up with what he's up to. And Robbie, thanks for joining me, man. It's been a really enjoyable chat.
Thanks, DK. Appreciate it.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to chatting to you again on the next episode.